Hello and welcome back to the PuckLuck.com betting and fantasy team previews for the Carolina Hurricanes. Carolina Hurricanes, back-to-back years winning the Metro. They make it to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, losing to the Florida Panthers. I think that going into the playoffs, they kind of lost a lot of steam with the Andrei Svechnikov injury, and they win the first round. They beat the Devils, who I myself was a big fan of. And it kind of looked like, man, maybe this team could just be that good, even without Svechnikov, but it didn't quite happen. They lose to the Florida Panthers. Sergei Bobrovsky stands on his head, and this team is, again, for 5 years in a row, not quite getting over the hump, not getting into the Stanley Cup final, let alone winning it, and back, to the drawing board, making some additions, making some changes. Of course, these last 5 years of playoffs come after a 9-year playoff drought where kind of feels like a distant memory now. And this is just a winning culture, a winning team that should be able to continue some of that into the future. So why don't we get right into it by going over our PuckLuck.com point projection. We have them at 103, which would be a 10-point decrease from last year at 113. 113 was good for second in the league last year, second to the Boston Bruins, who set a record for the best record in hockey, as I mentioned. This was a team going into the year I had picked to win the Stanley Cup. I picked them to be a President's Trophy winner and just never really got all the way home. Like I said, they were close, but close is not going to win you a bet. Coming down a little bit this year, it's just kind of a bit of the scoring, a bit of the goaltending. I think it's kind of feeding into this. And also it's just hard maybe to predict a team to go for over 110 or whatever they had, whatever it might be. I lean, maybe a touch higher than our model myself. I'll get into some of the reasons. We'll get into everything. I don't really see why the floor is so low. It would be quite a collapse of this team not making it, but we'll get into the lineup and maybe go over some worst case scenarios. But I think this is very likely a playoff team again. Going over the DraftKings Sportsbook odds, playoffs is minus 1,000. DraftKings Sportsbook, we have it at minus 260. Not a very good bet. Division, they won it back-to-back years. DraftKings is giving you nothing to bet here at plus 180. And then again, the Stanley Cup plus 800. It's just pretty indefensible, in my opinion, to bet that as well. They have it at 109.5 points. I got to be on the under a little bit here at not a crazy amount. I think this team is right around there, but you're going to give me under 110. I think I take it, but it's not my favorite bet for this team. So I think if you're only going to bet one thing, this is not it. I do have a favorite bet again. I have a couple bets in mind, but one that's a favorite, and we're going to get to that, and it will be the last thing I say. But I think I like it better than betting the under on points, although I do think the under is, like I said, a shade in the right direction. It's defensible to bet, but not anything more than just kind of like a fair bet. To the player points, I'm really high on Martin Necas overall. I couldn't find him anywhere. I even tried to just search any odds I could find this time, like really try to do a little extra homework. Try to look if I can find some offshore stuff. I found nothing. So again, comment whatever you got to do. Just if you can find it, let me know. I like to bet his over on points if I can find it. He did have Sebastian Aho. Pull that back up again. Points for 36.5 goal over. Yeah, I definitely am not betting him over on goals. That's pretty pie in the sky. Hasn't really been the focal point. I almost like the under a decent bit, but I don't know if I like it enough to bet it. It's probably fine, but the under on that, I don't think I'm touching the point under. I think he could have a lot of assists. And then other than that, I mean, Bunting is a really interesting fantasy play. I think he's probably the most interesting guy going as late as possible. And these are kind of the reasons right here as we get to the lineup. If he does slot in with Aho and Jarvis, as we're projecting, that feels really good. I think, Svechnikov, Necas, and Kotkaniemi could stay together, which is what we saw quite a bit last year. Teravainen was more up the lineup, but didn't look great last year. So it could be a bit of a flip between Bunting and Teravainen, but we know Bunting can play with top talent. So I really, really like betting on Bunting myself, especially in things like your Best Block Classic, where he also has some pretty good, not the craziest hit numbers, not the craziest block numbers, but he does produce those as well. I think this, again, is a really good lineup. There's some depth to it as well. There could be some prospects that could flutter in, but I think overall, good defensive team. They go out, they pick up Dmitry Orlov, who for some reason is slotted in that third unit, but I don't really think that's going to be the case either. I think he'll see a ton of minutes. They didn't pay him 7.5 for nothing. But there's a lot of defensemen, a lot of chefs in the kitchen, including, not even on this list, but Tony DeAngelo. So it really is quite interesting to figure out this defense, which is the last thing I touch on. But I'll get to my favorite bet. We'll get to the goaltending. Freddie Anderson, under 30.5 wins. Might sound like a broken record. I just gave you Jacob Markstrom under 30.5, but Carolina, I like it quite a bit more. I would double down on my units for Carolina, and I'm going to be putting both of them together on underdog, the Markstrom and Anderson unders. The main reason for Carolina, though, is we're already pretty confident they're going to run 3 goalies: Anderson, Ronta, and Pyotr Kochekov. Kochekov is the guy that they literally fired their AHL coach because he didn't want to start him in the AHL in the playoffs. They want this guy to play. So I really think you're going to see a pretty cohesive 3 goalies getting a pretty regular amount of starts, which would mean that all of them could see around, like maybe even at best, Anderson sees 40 starts. He's got to win 31 games. It was 30.5, right? I'm not in my mind. 30.5, right? He has to get, I think he'd have to have just an absolutely unbelievable record to hit that over. So I am slamming that under. I think it's a very, very good line, and the strongest one we've seen yet is the under 30.5 on Freddie Anderson. That's my best bet of any team we've done so far, as far as what I have. And last thing we're going to mention, as I kind of hinted at and already gone into a little bit of detail on, but I asked because I couldn't really get a quote from anyone. I think most of the Carolina beat reporters are focused on the football team in North Carolina and not as much on the Hurricanes. Don't blame them. But from Dylan, he asked me what I thought about the blue line. A lot of guys on the roster could lead to be, maybe a trade or what have you. And I think what the most important part of this is, in my estimation, and we talked, I don't want to misquote, but I think it was Nolt in our Discord. I meant Matt, but I don't want to be kind of a lot of negatives on the Brent Burns side from all these signings. And you might be thinking, well, they signed a left-hand shot. Is it really going to hurt Burns? But adding DeAngelo as well, it kind of feels to me like they want to be more defensive sounded overall. And I just think that Burns is not going to see the 20 to 25 minutes we're used to a night from him as last year. I think he's going to kind of start to diminish a little bit more into just an offensive-only player, which doesn't mean he's undraftable. It doesn't mean he can't have good upside. I just think it's going to be a little bit less than we're used to with Brent Burns. So that's my biggest takeaway here, is to kind of, I'm not going to say fade Brent Burns, but maybe pass him by in more lobbies than you're used to. Your season-long drafting, I think he gets a little bit more of a downgrade than you may be, thinking of him as a defensive juggernaut over the years. Other than that, I'm pretty firm with, Slavin, Shea, Orlov, Pesci getting a lot of minutes. And that's already 4 guys. So who else is going to get minutes? That's probably going to be Chatfield. So how many minutes are there for Burns? That's kind of my point, more or less. Maybe when they're losing in games, which won't be as often, he'll see more time. But I think as he ages, it's going to be less and less. So I think that's the biggest note here, is that Brent Burns might not quite be what he used to be. And it's sad because I've been drafting him in Best Buck a bit, but I'm kind of starting to fade it now that I've, rethought. Maybe he'll end up being out there because of the upside we know he has, but not my favorite play anymore. So best bet, 30.5 wins. And not because I don't think this team could be good, but because I think they'll be running 3 goalies. So I went way over on my time on this one, but we will be back next time with Colorado or Columbus or something.